Daddy, we're doing.
I'm doing a podcast, Dizzy. Hello and welcome to the Too Cool for School podcast. I am your host, Yannick, and on today's episode, we are doing a deep dive into apprenticeships. And I've got a special guest with me, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
Yep, thank you, Yannick. Hi, everyone. My name is Joel, and I'm currently a first-year apprentice at a global asset manager. Happy to be on this podcast today.
Amen. Great stuff. Great to have you, Joel. First of all, I want to start off with when you go back to year 11, not necessarily year 11, actually year 13, year 13, and you're thinking about whether to go to uni, apprenticeships, and whatever else, and there's so much opportunities, and maybe just even going into the working world. What was it about apprenticeships that drew you, and was it an easy decision to make?
Yeah, a great question. I'd say for me, what drew me to apprenticeships was the fact that, the obvious, you can earn a free qualification, uni debt, and, everything's paid for by the company through the government levy. So for me, I knew that I wanted to go into the working world straight away. For me, university, yes, was still a viable route for me, but I knew what I wanted to do from the moment I got into year 13. So in year 12, year 13, I knew I wanted to go into finance, but I didn't quite know what until I got into year 13. I did more work experience. So through finding more work experience in asset management, I remember I had an insight day at this company called Fair Oaks Capital, and it was supposed to explore private credit, which is part of asset management. And from there, I was like, wow, this asset management world is really cool. I really want to go into this. So for me, I applied to apprenticeships alongside university. I actually sent off 50 applications to 50 different companies. And I also applied to Russell Group universities. My top choice at the time was the University of Warwick. But, as time went on, I was like, actually, apprenticeship doesn't sound so bad. Warwick was my dream uni, but at the same time, my dream company was there. I was like, I have a shot against this dream company. I might as well go for it. And since going into the working world, I haven't regretted my decision. I think, obviously, there are a lot of selection pressures in the sense that, you're in the working world, you're forced to make high-pressure decisions faster. You don't really have much people to hold your hand as much as university. But, nonetheless, I'm happy to be doing my apprenticeship program. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
That's great. And of the 50 applications you submitted, how many responses did you get, or how many were successful?
So I got to 7 final stages. So the assessment center, you go into the company, you do a final interview and a group task. And in terms of how many were successful, it was actually just one. So just one was successful, which is the company I work at now, which is actually crazy.
Out of the 50?
Yeah, so out of the 50, it's insanely competitive. For the company I'm currently at, they only took on just myself in my role. So they typically have 3 roles open. I applied for portfolio management. They only took on one person, which was just myself. And I was like, wow, out of the thousands of applicants, they picked me. It was,
That's
still
amazing.
insane.
And what do you think, not only for the one company that you were successful for, but the 7 that you got into the final stages, what do you think made you stand out?
I think for me, what made me stand out was the fact that, so for one, when I was applying to my different companies, I learned that in the second half so the first 20 applications I was doing were kind of just, I was sending off applications here and there. I wasn't changing my CV, I wasn't changing anything. But going into 2025 at the time, so this is January, the second half of application season, was tailoring my CV, looking at, right, this is the job description here. They say they want someone who can work well in the team, so I'm changing my CV up to match that of the soft skills that are needed in the job description. And also within the interview, so you'd have an interview stage before you get to the final stage. It was just being my authentic self. Before I was trying to put up this front that I was someone who I wasn't, but just being your natural self, coming across clearly with confidence, and then also doing a lot of mock interview practice that kind of helped me get to final stages. All my final stages actually came from, the second half. So I got all of them in March and April, which is quite late considering that, normally apprenticeships start to open up from August. So I wasn't actually successful until like around March.
Well, that's amazing, and well done on the success. When you were in sixth form, do you feel there was more pressure from parents and school to go through the route of university, or was it balanced in a sense where whatever options students were considering, whether it was apprenticeship, going into work, uni, you felt that school and home were equally supportive?
Yeah, so I think there was quite a lot of pressure from parents, especially, my parents, come from an African background. Of course, they weren't really aware of the apprenticeship world or the concept of going into the working world and kind of skipping out on the university route. I think from day one, the plan was originally to go to university, to be honest. And I was telling my parents as I was getting my university offers, oh, look, I've got University of Nottingham here, I've got Warwick here, I might be able to go to a great university. But then, one day, obviously, that changed. And I had to break it to them in around April when I got my offer. I was like, now I've got this. Plans have changed. I want to go into the world of work. And it took me a while to actually sit down and explain to them in like a long conversation, this is how apprenticeships work. You get no debt, you earn experience, and you get qualifications as well. And also the fact that, I'm from Milton Keynes, so the fact that it was in London was also like a bit of a barrier that I had to overcome. My parents, it took a lot of convincing to tell them that, look, I know I'm working in London, a different area completely, but, I'll actually be fine. And even in terms of teachers, telling my teachers that I actually want to do an apprenticeship, there were times where, so I had final stage interviews during like school weeks, and I had to tell my teachers, look, I'm going to have to miss your lesson because I've got an interview. And some of them were a bit worried about my grades because, of course, you're missing learning. That's going to have an effect on your attainment grades. I mean, thankfully, on results day, I still got some decent grades. I met my university offers, but it was just that explaining that I had to do to kind of educate them on the benefits of taking that alternative route to university, the apprenticeship route.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as you said, you had to educate them. You had to give them confidence that that route, is a viable route. Whereas university, you don't have to educate anyone. You tell someone that you go to university, and there's like an expectation. Okay, you're going to university. That's cool. But why do you think, whether, and I'm not sure whether it's UK only, whether it's, in our societies, in our community, or maybe in particular, within our culture, why is it that sometimes the idea of no university, people think means no ambition? Like, what do you think it is about that mind frame where people think, actually, if you're not going to uni, you're not doing anything that's worth doing, essentially?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I think it's to do with like social norms. When you think about parents, around like when parents were quite young, there weren't a lot of apprenticeships around. And if there were apprenticeships around, it was like the manual labor job. So when you tell like, perhaps your parents or teachers that, oh, I actually want to do an apprenticeship instead of going to university, they're thinking, oh, is he going off to do a manual labor job or something, or like a low skilled job? So it's just the fact that, they aren't familiar with the concepts that corporate apprenticeships are opening up, those roles where you're sitting in an office job. A lot of people still think that it's just, a bunch of like, I don't know, he's going to be a construction worker or something like that. And I think, to be honest, when it comes down to this sort of thing, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I think a lot of people will be more familiar with the whole apprenticeship scene, in my opinion. And I think it's also that, university, typically you've seen like a lot of success come from university, in the past, or let's say 5 to 10 years ago. You get the degree and it's like you're basically guaranteed a very, very good job. I think nowadays we're starting to see, especially if you've followed the news recently, employment statistics have come out. People from top universities like Cambridge, we saw the case study that was used with that Cambridge student that came out of university. She's still unemployed right now. And I think now people are starting to shift their focus to apprenticeships, especially as the current government talks about, supporting and funding those more.
Yeah, and I guess we're in a society now where people are saying, actually, they want careers, they want jobs, they want sustainability, and we're not seeing that often when it comes to those who are taking the university route, because they go to uni, they rack up debt, and then when they finish uni, they're struggling to get jobs. So I can definitely understand and see why that is the case. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I know a lot of people when I was in school, and I saw it, quite a few times when I was head of year as well, is that students will think, because you're doing an apprenticeship, it means that you're not academically capable. So, you're doing an apprenticeship because you're not, smart enough to go to uni, and that was the misconception. And what are your thoughts about that misconception? And could you share in brief, how your school and A-level journey was, so people can get an understanding of the sort of caliber of people that go to apprenticeships and how it varies essentially?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a fair misconception, to be honest. I think it just boils down to the fact that people have asymmetric information about the whole, like, the nitty-gritty of apprenticeships. I think, especially with corporate apprenticeships, people forget that you actually have to study towards a qualification. So your education doesn't end once you get into the world of work. You're still doing all these qualifications alongside balancing your day job as well, which is actually quite hard academically. I've just recently sat an exam, this week, and I passed that, but it was extremely difficult to study towards my exam alongside, the world of work. And I think in terms of your second half of the question was about my journey, right?
Yeah.
So A-levels, I picked business, economics, and sociology. For me, this was actually, in terms of picking my A-levels, initially I was thinking, I'm going to do economics as my main subject. The other two subjects, I'll just throw in business because, I like business. And sociology was kind of just, the filler subject. It's like, sociology, I hear people find sociology a bit easier, so I might as well just pick it. And I think the journey throughout A-levels I think year 12 was quite a bit of a carefree type of journey. I was just coasting along and thinking, I'm just going to go to university anyway. Got into year 13, became much more serious about my career, and that's when I realised I need to step it up a notch. I had got my predicted grades in year 13, and I remember at the start of the year, I had like BBB, and I was like, if I want to apply to top universities and top apprenticeships, you're going to need more. There are top companies like Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan. Goldman Sachs, for example, they need pretty high predicted grades of like AAA, AAB.
Even for apprenticeships?
Yeah, for apprenticeships.
Wow.
So just to apply, you need pretty good grades already. So I had to get my predicted grades up in order to apply to some of these companies. And within like a few months, I was sending my teachers past papers. I was showing them, look, I can actually get an A star. By the time it hit November, I had predicted grades of A star, A star, A. I had to really improve in order to send my applications off to some of these companies. And they'd even ask for evidence of your predicted grades. Be like, I see you put A star, A star, A on your CV. Could you send me some sort of document that verifies this? So in terms of academics, they actually took this very seriously. I think the misconception that apprenticeships are for people who, weren't so academically gifted is, it's still a big misconception, but I think eventually people come to realize that it's actually not the case. And in terms of like results day, I ended up getting ABB. So it's not like, I didn't do an apprenticeship to escape higher education. If anything, like I have a passion for learning about things I'm interested. I just found that my interest was within corporate finance.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Thank you. And I wanted to know as well, so you applied for both uni and apprenticeships simultaneously. How did you find that experience, and how did they compare? Was it easier applying for apprenticeships, or was it easier for applying for uni? And how did you find, and how did you know where to look for apprenticeships? Like, do you go to specific companies' websites? Is there, you know, is there like a portal? Is there like a filler website? You know, like how does it work? You know, you're walking into offices, old school with your CV. Yeah, so it would be good to know like how it works and how the differing experience of applying for apprenticeships and applying for university was.
Yeah, so to the first part of your question about, you know, how different was it applying to uni and apprenticeships? I think it was very different, very different experience. You know, we're all used to the, you know, university. You write your personal statement, you apply through UCAS, you wait for your offers. You know, when I was doing university applications, I was lucky enough to I had a mentor who was at University of Warwick, so I had a lot of help with my personal statement. We actually managed to hammer away in like under a week because, you know, I was just sitting on calls with him. I was like, look, here's my personal statement. You know, what can I change? And we kept on changing and changing until we finally finished it. I think I remember submitting like in November. So I got that out of the way early because I really wanted to focus on my apprenticeship applications. And apprenticeship applications is very different to applying to universities. You don't need a personal statement, but you do need a CV and in some cases a cover letter as well. And then also like with applying to apprenticeships, it feels like applying to a job. You know, you have to apply, you send your CV through, you know, you do their CV screening, and then you have to do an online assessment, and sometimes you have to do a pre-recorded interview. So the type of interviews where you sit in front of your laptop and they put the questions on the screen and like, why are you interested in this company, etc., etc. And then coming into the company, the final stage was like I was not very familiar with the, you know, coming into companies. You know, we're in our corporate attire and stuff. You know, I wasn't quite used to being in a corporate environment. I remember for my first few final stages, I was shaking in my boots, didn't know what to do. I didn't even know how to greet properly. But, you know, as I did more interviews and I got more familiar with the process, I got used to how it was. And then repeat the second part of your question again.
So essentially asking how you navigated the journey from like GCSEs and sixth form into apprenticeship, so that people can get a bit of an understanding of the sort of caliber of people that go to do apprenticeships, and I guess the fact that you were able to apply or were considering of applying to Warwick whilst doing the apprenticeship shows really the sort of level you were, you know, academically, and I hope that could be encouragement to others who, you know, are smart students who have, you know, good predicted grades, and I guess for them to not see apprenticeships as this thing that, oh, you know, it's only because I can't get into uni and whatever else, but that there's so many options that they can, you know, consider around that. And before you spoke a bit, or you shared your experience of, you know, only one school getting back to you out of the 50 applications that you made. Is there any advice or guidance that you would share with, you know, any students now who are thinking about applying for apprenticeships, just in terms of you know, what they could do within that space to boost their chances?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, you know, you also asked about GCSEs and A-levels. I think you can prepare from just as early as GCSEs by actually ensuring that you get pretty decent grades. I'd say for like the top companies, especially if you're applying to finance or tech, you might want to be looking at getting a grade 6 or grade 7s across your, you know, your core subjects. So your English language, English literature, your maths, your science. Although science doesn't really matter as much, but it's more the maths and English. Ensure that you have a grade 6 or 7 minimum so that you can apply to most companies. Some companies, much like university, and this is where apprenticeships and university are kind of similar, they'll have, you know, their requirements, their academic requirements, and they'll say you must have a minimum grade of a grade 6 in English language and a grade 6 in maths, especially if you're applying for like a technical corporate finance role. Let's say you're trying to apply for investment banking, for example. They'll ask for a strong grade in GCSE maths. You know, like Goldman Sachs asked for a grade 7. I think Deutsche Bank asked that you even have like A-level maths. So
Wow.
in terms of advice, I'd say if you're applying to, you know, if you want to get into corporate finance and you're thinking of, you know, I want to go into investment banking or asset management, or I even want to go into like professional services, having A levels like A-level maths, A-level economics, you know, even further maths if you really want to take it to that level, and economics, you know, that can help strengthen your application. So just trying to do those STEM subjects. And then also I'd say in terms of preparation, you know, try to ensure that you've done your personal statement as quick as possible, because you'll find that, you know, as you progress through year 13, which is where they really step it up a notch in terms of the difficulty of subjects, you really need to have your personal statement done so you can, number one, focus on your academia, and number two, you know, you can focus on your applying to companies outside of school, because you're not having to, you know, juggle doing your personal statement and applying to companies last second, and then you lose track of what you're doing.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. That's important. And I wanted to ask as well, when you think about your time whilst doing the apprenticeship, and you know, I know you shared before we started recording that you've been like this. You're 6 months in now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like, what were those first few days like when you know you sort of come into the company, this big global, you know, asset management company? Like, what was the first few days like for you?
Yeah, I still remember, you know, the first few days, like the first day I walked in on desk, and I was just like, boy, I don't even know if I'm qualified for this. Like, I'm looking around, I'm looking at my team, like people are telling me, oh yeah, you know, I've done the CFA. The CFA is like quite a prestigious qualification, stands for Chartered Financial Analyst. It's 3 exams. It's one of the most highly viewed or highly respected finance qualifications that you can do. So, I mean, half my team has these qualifications. People are saying, well, I've done a master's at this university. I've come from Cambridge. I've done this. I'm just like, wow. I've come here through this apprenticeship route.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at these guys like, yeah, do I even belong here? You know, I was quite nervous as well. My line manager, extremely senior. I'm just like, man, like, what's he gonna do to me? Like, what am I gonna be doing? You know. But I think luckily, you know, now that I'm a few months in, like, the team's been very welcoming. I think you come to find that it's kind of similar to school, like being in a school environment. You know, there are you can assign like certain characters to certain people in like your team that you see in everyday life. Like, you can look at someone in your team and be like, oh yeah, this is the guy that would have probably been like the person who just sits down and does the work in school. This probably is the class clown who likes to just make jokes and kind of lighten up the environment. You know, and when I think of it like that, you know, that's what made, you know, the working in the corporate world less daunting. I was like, wow, you know, I actually feel like I belong here. After a few months, even people are telling me, oh, yeah, I remember the first day you came on desk, you looked so nervous, you know, you're wearing a suit every day, trying to like, you know, look very impressive and stuff. Yeah, I've looked around and I'm seeing that in the first few weeks, no one's wearing suits. Like, well, maybe unless you have a client meeting, people are in suits, and it's just like, people comment to me like, you're wearing a suit. Are you going to a client meeting?
Yeah.
Are you doing an interview? And I'm just like, nah, like, I just thought I dress smart for the occasion.
Yeah.
Everyone's really relaxed, wearing like quarter zips, and people are wearing shirts. And I'm just like, wow. That's when I realized, you know, it's not as scary as people say.
Yeah.
It just takes time to adjust to the environment.
No, that's proper. And you're part of the quarter zip crew now, man. You're part of the quarter zip crew
You got
now.
me, man.
And I wanted to know, like, what has earning sort of developed within you when it comes to, you know, money, independence, you know, responsibility, the fact that you're able to earn and make money. Like, how has that developed you as a person?
Yeah, I think earning money at a young age is definitely a privilege. I won't deny that. You know, I think typically when you start to earn money, there's that temptation to just go and splurge all the money. Wow, I've got this big paycheck. I want to go buy this set of clothes. Man, I want to buy new shoes. it gets quite difficult to manage your finances, especially if for me, I didn't work a part-time job prior to this, so this is my first time handling like large sorts of money. So I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna spend it on this, I'm gonna spend it on this. But I think, as you get into the, you know, you get used to working in the corporate world for a few months, then you start to think about, oh, I might want to actually save for, I don't know, a car when I grow up, or I want to save for, maybe I want to move out when I finish this apprenticeship. And you start to think about savings. That's where you start to think about, how do I budget my paycheck properly so that I don't blow all my income on just like some new shoes or something like that. So, nowadays when I get paid, I'm already thinking, how am I going to spend this money? I've got to allocate this to just leisure. I've got to allocate some money to some ISAs that I have. People talk about stocks and shares ISA, cash ISA, lifetime ISA. I think the biggest advantage of doing an apprenticeship outside of getting a qualification is the fact that you get to build wealth from very early on. So you can put your money into a lifetime ISA, you can put your money in stocks and shares, and you can build that long-term wealth from very, very early on. People talk about the concept of lifetime inflation. It's definitely a real thing. You feel like, oh, it's just £10 on lunch. It's not gonna do anything, but it does add up. It really does add up. I found myself, especially this month, trying a lot of new places, and then I've realized, oh, I've actually spent over my budget, and I haven't even been looking at my finances properly. So I think money does alter the way you think in terms of day-to-day spending. Especially, you start to think about budgeting more.
No, that's so intriguing, and it's amazing to hear how how a lot of the things that you've learned from being able to earn money has paved the way for you to look into other investment opportunities like ISAs, etc. And that's something that some of your peers, who go to university, one may not be doing, or if they do journey via that route, it will be so much later on. But you've been able to do that now because of your apprenticeship experience, because of what you're seeing, within your network. So you're exposed, to much more, which is interesting. I wanted to ask, in addition to, the sort of financial skills, financial knowledge that you've built up, what other areas do you feel you have been skilled in around apprenticeships that you feel your peers who have gone to uni may not get that same exposure? So we've highlighted, earning as one thing, but is there any other area or any other skill that you feel that you being an apprenticeship would allow you to gain, but not necessarily your peers who have gone to study?
I'd say, I think the first thing that pops into my mind is public speaking. Now, whilst I do understand, like university, there are opportunities to join certain societies, there are chances to do public speaking, but I think with apprenticeships, it's on a much larger scale. Sometimes in my day job, there are times where you're going to have to present as an apprentice. They might put you in these high pressure situations that kind of forces you to adapt and grow these sorts of skills, and especially even outside of working in the company. As apprenticeships are growing and it's starting to become more trendy in society, there are a lot more schools, there are a lot more organizations that facilitate these public speaking events where you can go and share your experiences. You can sit on panels, you can talk about the benefits of apprenticeships, you can talk about the real reality of being an apprentice. I think definitely my public speaking has developed over the course, and it's only been 6 months so far, but I look back at before I even started, I wasn't doing any of these public speakings. I wasn't sitting on any panels. Like I wasn't talking to much people outside of this. Starting my apprenticeship has allowed me to see that, wow, outside of even earning money, public speaking, I think, is one of the biggest things that you pick up on as an apprentice, especially since you're going to be the youngest in the room. You're going to be around grown up people, where it really matters in terms of the way you communicate. kind of forces you to improve your communication skills.
And being the youngest in the room and being the least qualified in the room, like how does that make you feel when you step into that environment?
I think it's quite scary, but it's also quite exciting at the same time. You know, for one, you're the least qualified, so you're thinking, oh, if I say this, like, how are they gonna react? Like, especially since I'm the youngest. You know, there's times where first few weeks on the job, and we're in meetings, and you know they're asking if anyone has any suggestions or ideas, and I'm just there like, oh, I don't know if I have an idea, but I don't know how they're gonna feel. You come to realize that actually I think everyone's still learning. You know, no matter what seniority they're in, everyone's still gonna be learning. You actually never stop learning. That's the number one thing that's kind of been drilled into my head. And I think in terms of being the least qualified, I think that since there's so much people who have these qualifications, it's an opportunity to learn from them. You know, people always tell me that, you know, the number one thing you should be doing as an apprentice is absorbing the knowledge from others who have done these qualifications before you. There are some people who might have done the qualifications you're currently doing, so the chance to kind of go and, you know, ask them, hey, like, you know, I'm doing this qualification, let's sit down and talk about it. You get those exclusive tips that you need. And I think it definitely accelerates your learning in terms of like getting that core technical knowledge deep into your mind.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. That's very helpful. Thank you for sharing. And you know, I wanted to ask as well. So if you think about, imagine 5 years down the line, you've finished your apprenticeship, you've moved on. Let's say because what would you say your industry is? Finance, accounting, investment?
So finance, asset management specifically.
Yeah, okay. So let's say someone's gone to uni, one of your friends have gone to uni, they've studied, you know, maths, economics, accounting, whatever, and they want to go into the same field that, you know, you're in now. What do you think would be the main difference in where you both stand or how you both navigate that industry, with one person having gone to uni and taken the uni route and you having had the sort of work experience and real life work experience that you have had? So you've both been able to access this industry, but what is the difference do you think you would be able to see, you know, sort of 5 years down the line, considering the different routes you would have taken?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the main difference would be like the baseline level of technical knowledge that, you know, I would have theoretically versus the person that's just come out of university. Now, of course, in university, you might have the chance to do some summer internships. You might have the chance to do some placements. And yes, those can be helpful. But at the same time, during your summer internship or during your placement year, you know, the responsibility you get is quite limited. And the reason why is because you might not have the qualifications to be able to, you know, do client meetings, for example. I think in 5 years' time, you know, I would have already finished my apprenticeship, which is only 18 months. I would have already earned my qualification. I'd have also pursued an additional qualification called the IMC, or the Investment Management Certificate, which is kind of like a regulatory qualification, which would allow me to kind of sit down with clients myself and do these client meetings. So I'd say big difference would be the responsibility and the qualifications and the knowledge. You know, the responsibility I'd have would be probably a lot more. I'd probably be a lot more senior, you know, probably potentially an associate in 5 years' time, maybe even getting to
Wow.
VP level, which is it just shows how fast, you know, the apprenticeships allow for kind of that pipeline into climbing the corporate ladder way faster than that of a university student.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, and that's an interesting take on that. And I wanted to add as well. Obviously, when we first got in touch or connected, it was online, and I saw, you know, a lot of the amazing work that you were doing, the amazing work that you were pursuing, and just in terms of, you know, our general conversations, I could see that you had a big passion for apprenticeships, and it's it'll be interesting for not only myself but for the audience to know, like, why is that something of a passion for you? Because you could have just applied for your apprenticeship, done your 18 months, and that's it. But you're very intentional with, you know, sharing your experiences, creating awareness around apprenticeships. So why is that important for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just like I'm very passionate about bridging the gap between knowledge and opportunity. So obviously for me, you know, again, come from Milton Keynes, not a lot of people know about apprenticeship opportunities. I mean, even I was quote unquote late to the cycle, late to the bandwagon, because I only basically discovered apprenticeships in, you know, year 12 summer. So going into year 13, you know, a lot of people in London, they know about these apprenticeships. Their schools facilitate sessions on apprenticeships. They have alumni who come in. You know, my school didn't have that. You know, my school we didn't have alumni who could come in and talk about apprenticeships. You know, the teachers didn't have the knowledge, or the study supervisors, the careers advisors didn't have the knowledge to kind of facilitate those sessions on apprenticeships. So for me, being able to go into the corporate world means that, you know, I can give back. You know, it's all about giving back at the end of the day, ensuring that as much people who come from a similar background as possible can see that, oh wait, you know, I might have material deprivation, i.e. not having the resources to kind of get those high academic grades, but you know, there's another opportunity, apprenticeships. You know, you can, it's not like you have to be extremely educationally gifted. There are some companies that, yes, might have higher requirements, but there are other apprenticeships, for example, you know, your level 4 higher apprenticeships, which is what I'm doing, that might have lower grade requirements, which, you know, that comes down to companies trying to be as inclusive as possible to even those who, you know, might not be able to get those good grades. So that's why for me, I'm truly passionate about apprenticeships, and honestly, any opportunity to give back, you know, I'd love to kind of grab that opportunity.
That's great. That's amazing. And I know you started your own podcast as well. It will be good if you can, you know, sort of share for us, you know, the name, the title of your podcast, and why you felt there was, you know, a sort of gap in that conversation that was important enough or big enough for you to say, do you know what, you know, I want to do this podcast and this is what I want to, you know, I want to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So, you know, recently I started a podcast called The Apprentice Room, which you can find on LinkedIn, you can find on YouTube. I actually recently released an episode of me sharing my own journey, my own insights in detail. So you can find that on YouTube. I think the reason why I started it was because, you know, yes, nowadays, you know, you see a lot more people, young people going on LinkedIn, they're posting about their apprenticeship, they're posting about their journey. You know, there are some people you might even find on TikTok if you're on the apprenticeship side of things. But I think podcasts are the most authentic way to kind of pour out onto other people. You know, you kind of see a more authentic side of people when they're on podcasts versus, you know, they're on social media. You kind of have to be careful with, you know, using LinkedIn because, you know, your employer might be watching what you post. You know, when you're doing a podcast, I think, you know, it's that chance to kind of give back without, you know, having to code switch or having to use certain professional terms and stuff. Yeah, and I think with podcasts, it's the easiest way to get people to feel comfortable about sharing their experience rather than, you know, them having to go online on LinkedIn and post to a quote unquote big audience where their colleagues might be watching, or where they might have to go on TikTok where they might get scrutinized for posting like day in the lives and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this podcast is like, and I also think like people don't really, you know, they don't really understand a lot of things. I think through just seeing someone's LinkedIn and saying, hey, I'm 6 months into my apprenticeship, normally you won't be allowed to talk about your role in detail or like specific things. So with a podcast, you know, you can kind of,
You've got that autonomy. Yeah, you've got
exactly.
that autonomy.
You've got control over what you can talk about, which is why I decided to start this podcast.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you very much. And you know, I just wanna end to say, you know, a big thank you for coming on. You know, it's been great having you, and it's good to always have the youth. It's always good to have the young people come and share their stories and their, experience and their anecdotes of what they're going through and how they're navigating, apprenticeship, uni, etc. Because ultimately, I could talk about apprenticeships from a sort of educator's point of view and how beneficial it is and whatever else. But it's the experiences of the young people, it's the experiences of the young adults who are actually doing the programs that matter. So it's been great to have you on. And it's been great to continue to see your progress and your growth over the last sort of year, 6 to 12 months that we've connected. So well done. And thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Great stuff. That has been the Too Cool for School podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us on our social media platforms.